is this development phase, which relies on population. So if you don't have the population what they assume, the urban areas won't spread out to this. So a lot of the assumptions are built into it. But just, I wanted to show you what role infrastructure plays in economic development. And you're absolutely right. There are certain conditions here with the interstate that probably, as you can see, there's some orange parts here too. So it isn't necessarily the case that whatever this infrastructure is in high-speed rail, it's took away the business.
Here we have an answer because I-5 is basically arid land that it is traveling to. 99 is going through fertile valley.
Going through cities, so that's what I'm saying.
That's
so
the difference.
how will high-speed rail add to that?
Yeah, and that's the thing. Part of it is, again, as I said with the prime farmland and things, so not all of the development can occur immediately. So if you look at it here, this is 40 years ahead where some of that land couldn't be developed. Yes.
One of the things and why so much growth is predicted for the east side of the valley is there's where water.
Yes.
Right, sure. Access to water is a very important thing too. Yeah, without a doubt. And also you have to think about other sources of support, energy, and when you have this kind of urbanization, along with it comes whatever benefits and problems that come with urbanization in general. So they didn't speak to that. It's just a nice visualization of what could happen based on their assumptions. And again, just keeping in mind that the transit, it looks like the growth in some areas isn't as much as in other areas, and a big part of that, I mean, if you look at Bakersfield compared to Fresno, the change in the urban area as a percentage is probably more in Fresno than it is here. And part of that is, again, restrictions in terms of land use, what you can use the land for, as I said, with the farmland and things like that. Any other? So again, I just wanted to set it up in terms of transportation. And in this case, we're looking at high-speed rail, but it doesn't have to be a high-speed rail. Any kind of infrastructure would have an impact in terms of urbanization. Yes?
Has anyone, just for grant purposes, just assumed it would go along I-5 just to see the population growth? I can see what the reasons behind it, but is there just a conjectural map that shows that?
No, there isn't a map, but as Dr. Patel mentioned, part of it is the area also has to be feasible for growth and urbanization. And one of the reasons we don't see LA expanding into Bakersfield are the mountains, right? So whether it's good or bad, that's keeping LA out.
That's a good thing.
Right? So there are geographical constraints. And here, whereas if you just go this further south, you have that urbanization to a point where San Diego and LA are essentially just one big like a metropolis, basically. So that kind of thing is prevented here because of the mountains. And here you wouldn't have it, part of it is because of the cost involved, and you wouldn't have necessarily the same growth, and you don't have the same people. So when we talk feasibility, it's pretty important where the track goes. If you avoid Bakersfield and go to Fresno, again, it's going to be very difficult. Or if you just have between Bakersfield and Fresno, that's not going to have the ridership either. So a lot of it depends on the assumptions and stuff. So today, we're just looking at transportation in general, and the high-speed rail could be one solution, or a better freeway system could be another solution. Like Germany has those autobahns where you can go 100 miles an hour or more. So there are different. I wouldn't recommend that, but yes.
If I could add another major influence in development is where the jobs are. So there's no employment centers along I-5.
Sure. And typically, there's also this theory about growth. So when you think of Bakersfield 100 years ago, there was something that attracted people here, and it was the oil. So typically, when you have a resource, it draws other support services. And as they come in, it just kind of accumulates, and there's a cumulative effect. So that's what's happening here. When they assume that the high-speed rail is going through here, they assume that people, let's say, might move from LA to live in Bakersfield and commute. And if they do, you'll need more restaurants, hospitals, schools, these kinds of things. So it's like a multiplier effect. So yeah, so it's not necessarily that, I mean, there's a causality in the sense that there's an industry that grows, that attracts other industries to support it, and then as those industries grow, others come in to support it. And to have certain industries, you need to have a certain level of population and things. And for instance, like in restaurants, we don't have a cheesecake factory here because we don't have the household income level for a cheesecake factory. So same thing with Nordstrom. We don't have one and we won't have one because we don't have the household level income to support one. So there are all these kinds of things that go into it. But essentially, infrastructure can either be put in to help existing development, or because it's kind of like, in the East they have this thing called kudzu. It's this weed, basically, vine that you just throw it and it just spreads and grows. So there's one theory of urbanization like that, where you just throw an industry and it just spreads, depending on what kind of industry it is and things like that. So that's not the case here. This one is very specifically tied to the infrastructure. Any other questions? Yes.
It's a bit disconcerting to see all of this brown kind of south of Bakersfield, where it looks like that's a lot of prime farmland. Is that the Arvin?
Yeah, here I think you're almost getting into the mountains here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so part of it is that when you have these areas, it can develop. Part of it is, again, because you got the mountains and things. And same thing with Bakersfield, there's more prime farmland surrounding here than, say, in Fresno or up by Stockton.
Let's make a couple comments. Is
Yes,
that
please.
one of the reasons why you don't have a whole lot of development over here is because your groundwater is very poor as opposed to down the east side.
Right.
The other issue was that you wouldn't have as much growth geographically if you went with higher density residential and multi-use. That would cut down the area of development.
And on that note, I'll have you come up and have the expert talk about transportation and infrastructure.
Hi.
What I'm passing